am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, I have with me my dear friend and colleague, Laura Froyen. For those of you who are not new to the podcast, know and love her. And for those of you who are new, welcome. You'll get to meet her. And I am sure you will like her the way other people love her. So today we decided to do a special episode in which we answer all your sibling questions. Laura, welcome back.
Hey, Anna. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like it's been so long since I've gotten to be on The Authentic Parent. So thanks for having me.
Likewise. So for the listener who is new, Laura and I used to do special episodes. We used to do them monthly, then they phase out and they almost disappeared, but we're not letting it go because life gets busy. And Laura started her own podcast. Many of my listeners listen to your show, The Balanced Parent. And I know you got inspired by me to start your podcast, which makes me even, more joyful. So for the new listener, I want to mention that on this episode, I do live coaching calls with the members of the Authentic Parenting community. And you can find those episodes in the library. They are in brackets. It says on-air coaching calls in front of the title. I do expert interviews, conversations with world-class experts, authors, and psychologists, mental health professionals, and just ordinary moms and dads who have amazing, interesting, inspiring stories, as well as I do solo episodes. And one of the offerings was the special episode that I would do with Laura, in which we had 3 segments. We would share a personal story from our parenting life. Then we would answer listener questions. And then we would conclude with our favorite finds and resources for that month. But since we aren't doing this on a monthly basis, we decided just to get together and do a bit of a more focused episode.
Yeah, I know that. So I know we've done a sibling episode in the past, and it's, I think, one of your most popular episodes that you've had on the podcast. And it's amazing. There's always new things to think about when it comes to siblings. So I'm excited to dig into some of these questions.
I also want to mention to the listener who may not know that we generated some questions in both of our communities through Facebook, through Instagram, and some by email. So I want to mention that both of us are on Instagram. That is the only social media platform that I use currently and enjoy somewhat. My handle, no, seriously.
I know. I know lots of the parents listening struggle with social media too. And I just want you all to know that like the professionals also struggle with it. We have a love-hate relationship with it.
Well, with Facebook, I only have hate. So I deleted my public Facebook business fan page, whatever it was called. I'm not even regretful.
That's amazing. That's so brave.
So that's what people said, but I feel so good. I have personal account. I don't post anything. The only reason I'm on Facebook because I have the Authentic Parenting community where a lot of our listeners are grouped together, right? That's our community. That's our space. I don't want to get rid of Facebook because of my community. And Instagram is the only place that you can connect with me, DM or send questions. of course, my contact information is always available. How about yours, Laura?
Yeah, so I do spend most of my time on Instagram. I also have a Facebook group called the Balanced Parenting Community, which is this beautiful community that is very self-led, peer-to-peer support. And so there's a lot of amazing parents in there who are seasoned and have done a lot of their own research and learning, and we really support each other there. But yeah, I mean, I can always be reached by email. DMs on Instagram are a good place to go. Yeah.
So for future episodes, people can send us questions. We are open. They know how to reach us.
Yeah.
So for today, let's read our first question and hopefully provide some answers.
Yeah, so this one came from a member of my community, and she's asking how to respond to her kiddos when one of them says, "I don't like my sister." And that's a big one. What do you think, Anna?
I think I would love to know the age of those kids. And sadly, the questions that we've gathered don't come with a lot of detail, right? I need more clarifying questions. So I'm assuming these are young children and not teenagers, right? Even though that's possible. You can always hate your sister. It doesn't matter how old you are. So I think when a child says, "I don't like my sister," I want a parent to not take that statement at face value and respond to that and make a big deal out of it and say, or to justify or to bring examples of, no, you love your sister. Your sister is your sister. You have to love your sister, right? It can go that direction too. With young children, when they say things of that nature, that usually means, I hate what my sister is doing right now. I'm annoyed by her behavior. Yeah. She's in my way. She's in my space. She took my toy. That statement, I hate my sister, we need to translate that into what is the child feeling in this moment. And it's not a lifelong declaration of their relationship. It's not tragic. So I want to say to the parent, calm down. Do not respond to that statement as if it's like, wow, what did I do? I raise kids who hate each other. So don't do that. But become curious and say, ooh, it sounds like you're so mad at your sister. What's going on? What happened there? Allow space for the feelings to surface and allow the child to have those quote unquote hateful feelings towards the sister in the moment. You're not a bad parent for encouraging those feelings to surface, to percolate, to come to the surface. Otherwise, the child will hold it inside, and this was, let's say, a momentary thing. But if we don't address it in this way, it may turn into something bigger later. So these are my initial thoughts.
I so agree. So often when my kids say something like that, so I have two kids, they're almost 9 and 6 when we recorded this, and they will both say things like this often when they're upset. So I find it really helpful for me if I tack on right now in my head. So if they say something like, "Oh, I really hate my sister," I just mentally add right now to it, like to the phrase, so that I'm responding in the moment. I keep us present. Kids are notorious. Young kids, especially under the age of 8, are notoriously black and white, all or nothing thinkers. That's just how their brains work. And so, and they're very in the moment beings. And so, of course, when someone's taken their toy or taken the last ice cream bar, which is an example that I think that we have perhaps coming up, or, has done something to irk the other one, of course, right then it feels like they don't like them. And I also find it helpful to talk with my kids about how part of us can feel one way and part of us can feel another. We don't, all of us likely doesn't hate our sister. That is something, though, that can happen later. I so agree with you, Anna, that it is so important that we validate and empathize with what they're saying and with the underlying feelings. You didn't like when she did that. This morning, my 9-year-old kind of grumpy in the morning. And my 6-year-old is goofy and silly and talks in silly voices. She's just a funny kid. But it really annoys and gets under the skin of my 9-year-old. And so she proactively said, I'm not feeling my best this morning, so I'm going to sit a few seats away from my little sister so that I don't get grumpy with her, which I thought was super awesome. She was taking responsibility for her own body and her own feelings. She wasn't making her sister change herself. Like, these are things that we've been working on for a long time. And unfortunately, the little sister got her feelings hurt because she thought that meant that her big sister didn't like her or didn't love her. And so there's room for being really emotionally present with the feelings that are there, not trying to change them, not trying to argue. Of course your sister loves you. Of course you don't hate your sister. You don't really mean that. It just feels that way right now. Those are all really invalidating statements. We know that it's true. We know that they don't actually hate their sister, or not all of them hates their brother, but we don't have to say that right then. We need to hold some space for their feelings, accept their feelings, not shame them for feeling that way, so that those feelings can move through them, and then they can start feeling the love that they have for their sibling. And, it's possible to love someone and not like them at the same time too,
Yeah. Human relationships are paradoxical like that. Even with our partners, with our children, often I find myself hating and loving my kid at the same time, and my partner, who annoys me sometimes. I'm sure he feels the same way, right? We're not always going to be in love, and love is not the only emotion, right? Things happen. It's a dynamic relationship, and I think allowing space for all feelings and knowing that with young kids, it's temporary. When they say, I hate this, I hate you, mommy, I hate broccoli, I hate this food, that's the strongest word that they know to express what they feel, the intensity of the feeling. It doesn't mean hate the way an adult would interpret hate, right? So I think that's also a good distinction. So be curious, stay with the feelings, inquire more, and say, wow, you're upset with your sister because, yeah, I could see that, she was very mean when she did that. And now you hate your sister. Wow. Stay with that. But then once you stay with the kid, the child will develop a perspective. Once they express the yucky feelings, they will hopefully look back and go and play with the sister the next moment, right?
Yeah, because expressing the yucky feelings leaves room for the softer, more loving feelings that are underneath. They're always there. Kids can't just, kids are emotionally inexperienced and have less capacity for, noticing all of their feelings at the same time. And sometimes if a feeling is really big, it gets in the way of being able to notice and recognize the other feelings. So sometimes the dislike or the anger gets in the way of the love. And so getting the anger out lets the love come back a little bit. And it's okay. I think we also have to give our kids permission to not always I think that, there's this message that we have to like everybody all the time, and we don't have to, we don't have to.
Well, siblings, you don't choose your siblings, right? You choose your friends. Siblings, that's it. It's built in, it's there, whether you like it or not, whether you get along with them. Your personalities might be different. And a lot can go on in a sibling relationship. I think another wonderful thing that happens that a lot of parents get worried about is when one sibling annoys the other and they think that's a really bad thing. But I think if you think about it deeply, the sibling who is annoying the other sibling has to know what triggers, what buttons to push. They have to know intimately the other person so well, to be so in tune with that person, to know what annoys them, right? Yeah. So that's a skill in and of itself. I think reading people, knowing people, being so attuned and even empathetic in those moments. Yeah. I think seeing it from that angle and not just pure annoyance. For example, I grew up with a brother, and I know you had a sister, correct? Yeah. My brother is 2 years younger than me. And we did have a very healthy, normal, typical sibling relationship. There were fights and arguments and all sorts of things. And we were very different in terms of our personalities. And I am very lucky to say my brother is one of the best people I've ever known in my life. And I have a wonderful relationship as an adult. We went through a lot in life together, through the earthquake and through severe times. And the student years we went, lived together, with hardships we experienced. But we also had that typical sibling relationship where I knew what would bug him, and I would on purpose do those things, annoy him to a degree of madness. But it's good because we knew each other so intimately.
Yeah, intimacy is the word that was coming to mind too. Anna, I think you're hitting on something really important here too, is that when it comes to siblings, we have a lot of like ingrained beliefs and mindsets that I think we need to shift. And I know we haven't mentioned it yet, but you and I are hosting a workshop coming up pretty soon. And we are going to be talking about some of those really key mindset shifts that need to take place so that we can authentically and in a really balanced way approach sibling relationships with our kids. It's vital that we do that work, that mindset work, so that we aren't getting in our own way and letting, limiting beliefs or, thoughts about how siblings are supposed to act or our own stuff really get in the way of what's blossoming between the two individuals or the three individuals that are unique human beings that are growing up in our homes,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And since you mentioned the workshop, I will briefly say that we are teaching a master class, a workshop, a 90-minute class on October 21st, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central Time. And the second part of that class would be taught on November 4th. It's a two-parter, November 4th. Again, the same time, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central Time. And we will have a link for registration in the show notes. We will post about this on social media. If you have questions, if you want to go deep, if you want to deal with your mindset issues, or we will be answering your questions too in the class. It's a 90-minute class, ample time for learning, Q&A, and it's a two-parter. So I hope you will register or you will pass this information to someone who truly needs help with their sibling rivalry issues, who are raising more than one kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Anna, I think that I don't think we have to be having really big issues between kids in order to benefit from this workshop. Most of us grew up in homes and families where the parents didn't know how to have healthy conflicts and disagreements. We didn't get to see, for the most part, what healthy conflict, healthy communication, conscious relationships look like. And at the same time, we're all parenting, trying to be more authentic and balanced and connected in our parenting. And it makes sense that we struggle in figuring out how to nurture these relationships between our kids when we didn't get to see that growing up. And so even if things are going pretty okay, there's some bumps in the road, but you're not quite sure how to handle a few things, I think that folks will be able to benefit from this workshop. It's we put a lot into it. It's a two-parter because we started making it and we're like, we can't teach this all in one class. But I think that there's a lot there, especially the mindset pieces, what your role is, and in the relationship, what their role is. I think that those things are really important and they don't get talked about enough. I mean,
and how to coach children.
Yeah.
Like in those moments, instead of solving unilaterally their problem, I think is huge, because you want to have this lens of building skills, teaching children, equipping children with those skills so that they can, like your daughter did this morning. Yeah. She was self-aware and she advocated for herself and she took care of herself. She didn't just say, mommy, or pushed her sister right. She already applied a skill that she has learned. So it's all about time. Over time. Yes.
Over time, over years and years of, sweetheart, if Evie is bothering you, she has a silly personality. If she's bothering you, it's your job to move away, and like it's years and years of coaching. But yes, yeah. This coaching piece that you're bringing up reminds me of this question that we have from one of your community members, Colleen. Do we want to go there?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
do want to go there. But before we go there, can I just mention that the class that we will be teaching
Oh, yeah.
is a
Sorry.
live class. It's a live class. It's interactive, it's hands-on, it's live, and you get to see us and interact with us live. So be sure to register for the class. So I'm going to read this question from Colleen from my community. She asks, coming up with win-win activities to do when kids have opposite preferences. Do-do-do-doom, do-doom.
Yeah. So when I hear a question like this, I mean, the first thing that I want to ask is, what is it that's making this parent feel like it is their responsibility to manage this type of interaction with their child? And I think that that's something we're going to be talking a lot about in this workshop, is figuring out what is my role, and then supporting the kids in figuring these things out themselves. Collaborative problem solving, working together to find win-win solutions, is a skill that's built over time and takes lots of practice. They can't get that practice. They cannot build that really critical life skill if we're solving their problems for them. So we really need to come alongside them, help them, clearly articulate their perspective, understand their siblings' perspective, and then work together in a creative way to find things that are those win-wins, or figure out how to have fun on their own. Siblings don't always have to play together either. Those are my initial thoughts, but that collaborative problem solving piece it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about, that all kids need to learn that skill, and that childhood is the perfect time to be teaching this. When I was preparing, Anna, for this podcast episode this morning, I asked my kids, I told them I was going to be doing a sibling episode. And I asked if they had any advice for parents out there. And my 9-year-old gets annoyed with me sometimes if I get too into their disagreements, if they're having a fight, if I get too into it, and kind of get in their way of what they're working out. And so she told me to tell you all to teach your kids how to solve their own problems and then get out of the way. That's what she wants you all to know.
That's very good. Yeah. I can't ask my kids, since I have an only child. The only thing I can ask her, do you wish you had a sibling? She says, no, are you kidding me? No, she doesn't. But to Colleen, I would say that, and I know Colleen, she's a very conscious, hands-on mom. So, and she has a preteen and a young teen. So I think honoring their differences, giving them space to develop their own hobbies, passions, their own activities is good in life, right?
Yeah.
We don't always have to do things together to enjoy just because we're family. And I mean, we already share space, and a lot of things together as siblings. Creating separation, especially when it comes to activities and friendships, having one sibling have their own life, that's a boundary. I think that's valuable,
and healthy,
and healthy.
Yeah.
And again, can you invite? Apart from that, you can do family activities. I think where everybody enjoys. If Colleen's goal is to have her children to do an activity together, instead of the kids, can you do it together as a family? And that way the kids get to experience what it's like to be together and experience something together. I think that would be one angle, honoring their preferences, giving them space, creating boundary intentionally. That would be my second suggestion. And of course, cultivating curiosity. If one child is interested in something and the other has zero interest in that activity, doesn't mean we have to hate that activity, right? You can still invite this child to be curious. What do you think your brother likes about this? Does it enliven him? You can ask questions and generate interest and curiosity in the party who is not interested in that activity. What is my brother enjoying about X? Etc. and vice versa. I think that would be my initial suggestion here.
Yeah. I really like that you said that too, that it's okay to be different. And it might even be a quite positive thing, being able to see the unique contributions that each family member brings to the family, the things that each kid invites us to do that, normally we wouldn't do if they weren't there. My sister is 4 years older than me, and growing up, we were very different. We had very different interests. She was beautifully musically talented and gifted. And we went to concerts that I would never have been exposed to or gone to. And that perhaps as a kid, I kind of hated. I kind of was bored by them. But now I'm so appreciative as an adult that I had that experience that I wouldn't have gotten if she wasn't a member of our family.
You're bringing up a good point. Sometimes parents can take this too far. What I said is creating boundaries. Sometimes parents can say, oh, he likes that, she likes that, and never intermingle their worlds. But I think it's still a good idea to try. To invite to the concert. You can even empathize with your kid and say, I know you hate classical concerts, but it's important for your sister. Do you know why it's important for your sister that we show up and support her in her theater, in her performance, in her sporting activities? They don't always have to love the activity, but the exposure is good too. And afterwards you can talk. How do you think your sibling, felt? Do you think felt when she saw you were in the audience and you brought flowers, or, you were clapping? Or how did it feel for you to see your sibling on the stage performing? And just asking questions, being curious. I think exposing one another to each other's worlds, also keeping their worlds apart when necessary. I think is the best way to navigate this.
And this is making me think too, Anna, that childhood is a really short time in the lives and relationship of these siblings. So my sister is 42. Is she 42? Yeah. I'm 38, turning 38. I mean, it's not forever. The 18 years that they're living in the same home together, it's not forever. And relationships change and grow and mature over time. And my sister and I are closer now as adults than we ever were as kids. We have found so much more common ground as we become moms and move to the same town. And it's a radically different relationship. And so I think I think we panic sometimes as parents. Gosh, they fight all the time. They're going to hate each other. It's not forever. They won't be young forever. They won't have underdeveloped brains forever. We just need to equip them with the tools and skills they need and kind of nurture relationships so that they can then take ownership of them as they grow older. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think that's, yes, people catastrophize usually about the future based on what they see now in the sibling relationship. Number one. Number two, they bring their own stuff into the sibling relationship from maybe with their parents, maybe with their sibling, maybe, not everybody has great loving relationship with their siblings as adults. And so they worry, they don't want to replicate that because they know how painful it is not to have a sibling or to have and not have at the same time. So I think parents want to craft this relationship and they think they have a lot of influence, but I think the focus for me would be on building skills, on coaching kids to get along, collaborate, perspective taking skills, cultivating empathy in both children, conflict resolution skills, post-event analysis. Let's say something happened. Can you sit down with both kids and reflect and take away things? I think these are the important skills for me. And it's happening now in the present, as opposed to worrying about what their relationship is going to be in the future. That's out of your hands, unfortunately. They may or may not, but what you can do and what's your responsibility, I think, as a parent, is to teach them those lifelong skills to get along with their siblings, which later is going to be applied into other friendships, into other relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I mean, and so like you went on to these 2 points that are like the big pieces that we're going to be teaching in this workshop are those mindset shifts, how to get our fears and our stuff out of the way, to see them clearly and let them own their relationship, and then equipping them with the skills that they need to have a meaningful, successful relationship that is theirs. Yeah. Love it.
Absolutely. So let's move on to
Yeah.
the next question.
Okay, should we do Shannon's question?
Let's do Shannon's question.
Okay.
This is my favorite question. I
Yeah,
love
this
it.
is a good one. So how to navigate when your girls are so close in age and they compare and want everything to be fair, air quotes, and the same or equal, right? The bickering and begging, everything to be exactly the same is draining. For example, Bella had an ice cream last night and then Gina wanted one because she saw her sister and then there wasn't any more left in the package and she got so upset and had a meltdown. Oh, yeah.
I think children who are close in age, siblings, you are always going to see this competitive relationship. And children who have a big gap, siblings who have a big gap, they have more of a complementary relationship. So it's very natural for siblings who are close in age to have a lot of competition.
Let me just drop a little research in there. So I studied this a little bit. So the so 2-year age gaps tend to have the highest conflict and the highest closeness between siblings. And 4-year age gaps tend to have the least conflict, but also the least closeness. So that's just something to put in there. Anyway,
okay.
Sorry for interrupting.
So people who we have conflict with, we become closer. So conflict brings people together.
Yes. Yay for conflict. It's not a bad thing.
I may recommend then an episode suggestion here. My fantastic conversation with Dr. Ed Tronick. Do you know from the Still Face Experiment?
Ooh, you had Tronick on?
I had Tronick on. He was my dream guest, and he's co-author, Dr. Claudia Gold. She's a pediatrician. They wrote together a book called The Power of Discord, all about human conflict.
Yeah.
And I had both on the podcast. And I can't remember the number of the episode, but it's titled The Power of Discord, that episode. It's a fantastic episode about mother-child relationship. They talk about their research, the Still Face Experiment, how conflicts are important for relational growth, and how repairs are even more important.
Yeah.
And to your point.
That's what builds resilient relationships. Little micro ruptures and repairs is what builds resilience. We need them. We need them. So conflict is good for kids, for siblings. In this case, in the class, we're going to address this point too, that Shannon raises. When you have siblings, it doesn't always have to be equal or the same. It's a myth, and it's really harmful, I think, in a lot of cases. You can be fair, but not equal or the same. Just because, it's your birthday, little child, doesn't mean your sibling is going to get a gift. Just because we got you a pair of sneakers doesn't mean he's going to get a pair of sneakers. Just because you went out with your friends doesn't mean she has now to have an outing with their friends. It doesn't have to be this constant, equal, same experience. Scorekeeping, right?
Scorekeeping,
yeah.
Yes. But fairness is good. In this case, I think, okay, so the older sibling got to the ice cream, ate the ice cream. There is none left. The younger sibling wants ice cream. Okay, it's a natural consequence of life. I think helping her with her emotions in this case is important, whether it's a sibling or just a consequence of some event in life, right? This doesn't have to be around the sibling issue. But what I would do in this case, I would talk to the child who took the ice cream separately after this event, after I attended the meltdown of the younger kid, and comforted and etc. I would talk to the older kid, not in that moment necessarily, but maybe like the next day or a couple of days later. I would say, you went to the fridge and you ate, got to the ice cream. Did you think about offering your sister? Do you think there was enough ice cream? Like, sort of creating this reality for this kid not to be so self-centered and self-serving, but think about other people. Could you maybe have said, hey, Gina, I'm going to grab some ice cream. Do you want to have ice cream? I'm not suggesting that this kid is going to do it the next time or this is the right pathway. What we're doing with this is generating a little understanding for the other child, a little empathy, a little perspective taking, a little, what can you do differently next time? If you went to the cookie jar, if people have cookie jars, or if you went to grab something and it was the last one. And I'm not suggesting that they have to share everything equally, but being considerate in life is also a good thing. And so I think talking about it after the fact with the kid, not in a blamey way, how dare you took the ice cream, you never even thought about your sister or stuff like that. Right. But just like from this kind, compassionate place of
curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Young kids don't think like 2 steps ahead of the time, right? They do the thing in that moment. So they didn't do it maliciously, on purpose. Sometimes my partner, my husband eats the last, bar, the fruit bar. Yeah. And my daughter comes home and says, where is my favorite, fruit bar? Daddy ate it. I hate daddy. And she gets mad, right? In that moment. Mm-hmm. So it's very normal when you share space and life with people, this kind of stuff is going to happen. So, but I'm curious about your thoughts since you have siblings.
Yeah, I think it's a balance, right? Of teaching the skill of like thinking of others, which I think that people don't realize is a skill. Like it's a cognitive skill, being able to perspective take and put yourself into someone else's shoes and hold in one hand your wants and needs and in the other the wants and needs of another person. Like that's a skill that's built over time. So I think like there's a balance between that and honestly, I don't know that I want. I know for me as a girl who was raised in this culture, I was given the message that I had to put others before me all the time. And it hasn't always served me well as a woman. I don't really want that for my girls either. And so there's this balance of how do we look out for each other and know that it's okay for us to have our own wants and needs. And so in our house, the language we use about that sort of thing is let's come up with a plan. Let's come up for a plan with how to handle, if there's only one ice cream bar left, what to do about that. So, hey, this situation happened. We're through it. We've comforted the one who's having the meltdown. I can relate to that. Like you see your kid, your friend, your sister having a sweet or a treat and you want one too, and then it's not there. I can understand why someone would have a meltdown. So I think attending to those feelings without blame and shame, the disappointment, oh, you're so disappointed, returning the focus to the siblings' feelings. So I think oftentimes siblings in those moments will say, she's so selfish. She didn't think about me. She took the last one, and really working hard to return the focus to the kiddo who's having the problems. You're so disappointed. You really wanted that ice cream and there wasn't any left, without having that language then be blaming the other person, really returning the person to focus on their own well-being, their own feelings, as opposed to laying blame. Am I being clear? Yeah. Okay. So I think that that's helpful. And then once things have calmed down, like let's work together and make a plan for how to handle this in our family. In our family, when there's only, one Oreo left in the package, what do we want to do about that? Is it that we want to just quick sneak it and eat it ourselves? Is that what feels good in our family? Or would it feel better for us to say, hey, there's only one Oreo left. Does anybody want it? Does anybody want to split it with me? What is the approach we want to take as a family? That's what I would want to see happening here, is really bringing it to light that the person who took the last one wasn't being malicious or being selfish. There's a difference between being selfish and being self-focused and not thinking of others versus actually thinking of others and then quick eating it themselves. Like those are two different things, right? And so I think having kind of an open conversation about how in our family do we want to handle this sort of thing? With grace and space for us to get it wrong or needing to adjust the plan over time.
Yeah.
I think some families too need to have, like with high like high desire things for lots of families. I know like one family that I worked with had a lot of scarcity around Pop-Tarts. That was the preferred food of two kids. They both loved having them as treats. And at the end of the day, like what they were seeing is if when the mom went to buy Pop-Tarts, there would be a quick race to just eat them as fast as they could. So each kid felt like they were getting more, than getting their fair share. And so what this mom ended up doing and working out with the kids is that each kid got their own box with their own name on it. And they regulated their Pop-Tart consumption for themselves as opposed to feeling like they were in competition with each other for the amount of Pop-Tarts. And so I think that there's solutions like that can work really well because we don't want to create scarcity around resources in a home. We want a sense of abundance, that there's always enough for each of us and everybody gets what they need.
Yeah, I love that. And can I make a true confession?
Yeah.
Not having been raised in the United States, I have never, ever had a Pop-Tart. I don't even know what it is.
Oh my gosh. There's these little toaster pastries. They're like kind of like almost like little kind of pie crusts with a fruit filling. They're not great. You're not missing anything. If you go to a farmer's market and they have Pop-Tarts there, like that are handmade, those are delicious. But, no, they're like, yeah.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
That was clever solution by that mom.
Yeah.
I think, see, that's, again, it comes down to fairness, not always the same, but sometimes see that's the same, and they can learn to manage their own thing.
What's cool about this mom is that it's the kids who came up with that solution.
Oh, I love that.
They sat down as a family to talk about like, okay, there is the scramble for Pop-Tarts. Whenever we bring it in, what are we going to do about Pop-Tarts? And it was the kids who came up with this solution, and it worked really well for them. Those kids are in college now. This was a few years ago, and now they buy their own Pop-Tarts, and again, we don't have to manage this stuff forever.
I love that. I love that. So what's our next question?
Yeah. So it looks like this one is from Julia. And I love this question too. Her kiddos are, I think, 6 and 3. And she's wondering how to keep the older sibling from parenting the younger sibling. I think this is a great question. I run into this with my older one. My older one is quite a leader and a rule follower and likes to be in charge. So I'm kind of curious, Anna, what your thoughts are on this. I'm happy to share how I approach this with my kiddos, but it does crop up in my family. I'd love to know your thoughts.
I think this is very common among kids. If it happens among younger kids, which in this case, it is a younger child, 6 and 2, or 4 and 2, 5 and 3. I think it's an interesting dynamic to observe. One, it tells me that the older kid who is reinforcing the rules or telling the kid, this is not right, don't do this, we don't do this, sort of in this kind of way, that means that they're rehearsing the rules that they themselves know. It's sort of like they're taking a different role. You know what I mean? A bit of a more authoritarian role. And they're rehearsing the roles that are common to this household.
Oh, so, Anna, that is such a helpful reframe for me. Just like for my own parenting. Yeah, that's part of them like knowing and firming up the rules in their own mind.
Yes.
I love that reframe. That's so helpful. Thank you, Anna. Woo.
So it doesn't mean that necessarily that all the parent might see is like, wow, my kid is being bossy, my kid is parenting. But what is going on in that child's mind? They are, especially when they're young, 6, 4, 5 ages, this moral development happens, right? Rapidly in what's right, what's wrong. And so by reinforcing they're practicing those skills again, but the parent has to do certain things here. But I just wanted to offer that thought that is not always this bad thing. I think parents inadvertently could create this dynamic too. And here is what I'm thinking. When there is already a child in the house and you bring in a new sibling, parents always somehow want to make the older sibling part of the care and helping the mom with the diapers, with the sibling. They're trying to make this work. And, because they're trying to avoid this jealousy situation, part of adjustment. It's all understandable. But I think if the parent relied on this kid too much for, can you do this for your sister? Can you pick up this? Can you bring this? You're helping your sister. If you're constantly using this angle, well, don't be surprised that one day that child may run with it and take it a little too far because you gave them that role already without even thinking about it. Or sometimes when there is an older kid and there is a new sibling, parents sort of expect a little more from the older sibling because in their eyes, there's the newborn who is more vulnerable, and there is the 5-year-old who overnight, jumped in this new position in the sibling podium, right? That they're older, bigger, you're a big brother, you're a big sister. Constantly hammering this, I think, is not good. Because how is this child going to use that power? With that power comes responsibility, right? They're still young kids. Your 5-year-old, as needy and as vulnerable as your newborn. Yes, they are a little more capable, right? But giving them a little more power, expectations, or you have to behave better now that, they go a little too far. And I think children can abuse that in a way that they can apply that to their younger sibling.
Yeah. And I think it's also natural for kids to feel, when they feel like there's not a lot, they don't have a lot of control over their lives, which kids in that, 6, 5, 4 age range do. When people feel out of control, they try to control others. That's just how, like, a natural response to that too. And so I think like lots of kids, if we are coming from a place of where we are managing their behaviors a lot, it makes sense that they will kind of play hot potato with that and then turn and try to manage someone else's behaviors. I think that that's pretty natural. And there's personality types too, that some kids just are leaders and want to make sure everybody's following the rule. Like that, there are personality pieces to this too. And helping a kiddo understand what's their place and what's not. And if you have been putting responsibilities on your kids because you thought that that's what you were supposed to do. This is the message we get, Anna, when we bring in a new sibling, get the older one involved in the care, have them help with diaper changes or bring a toy to the baby. We're told that's what the message parents are given. And so if we're realizing that perhaps we've kind of been doing this and it's given the older sibling the message that they're responsible in some way for the younger sibling, then we have to walk that back a little bit and be overtly and very authentically and clearly communicate to the older one, honey, for some reason, I think I've somehow given you the idea that you are responsible for your baby sister. And I am so sorry about that, that I'm, because you're a kid, you don't need to be in charge of someone else. I will help them learn how to, cross the street holding hands or how to not draw on the walls. That's not your responsibility. That's my responsibility as the mom. And you can just be a kid, like having a little bit of an open conversation of like, ooh, I put some things on you that weren't really yours and that wasn't fair to you. And I'm sorry for that. And you can let that go now, can be helpful too.
What you said about control, I want to say a couple of words about that. Yeah, the control aspect is important here because also I would love to see the dynamic between the parent and the older sibling who is parenting the kid. What's the dynamic there? Is the older sibling, or it could be a teacher, right? Children, we know, process their life's events through play. And they mimic ordinary day-to-day events. Let's say if a child goes to school for the first time, they come home and they play school, except in this case, they're not the kid, they are the teacher because it gives them more power and you can see how they play and how they scold the animals, that the soft toys that they have, how they bring that into play. Same is true about this dynamic. If a parent is constantly maybe scolding the older sibling, I don't know, encouraging them to behave better because they're older, bigger, and this kind of approach, maybe they are playing that out, sort of that role play onto the younger sibling. That there could be that element too.
I 100% agree with that for sure. I think it happens a lot. And so those are invitations to take a look at what our role is in this without like being unkind to ourselves, but being so kind and compassionate and graceful with ourselves. Oftentimes we have the very best of intentions and the outcomes of those are not exactly what we thought it was going to be. And nothing is set in stone. Everything is fixable and repairable, but it's a lot harder to do that when we're hard on ourselves, I think.
Yes. Here is Laura with her compassion piece.
It's so important.
Yeah, I agree. It's important. But I just wanted to say one extra thing about personality types. It's important. Yeah, like my daughter is an only child, but she's very bossy. She is a natural leader, very, very competitive. She doesn't even have siblings. She's very competitive. When I hear her speak on the phone with her friends, I'm like, oh God. Like it's always, and other people allow that dynamic, right? It's not that she's this bully that gets her way. I invite questioning, conversations. I'm like, how do you handle that? Whose decision was that to go for pizza this weekend? I always ask, is that mine? I decided, I organized it. I'm like, did other children want to participate? I always want to invite other people's perspectives, other people's feelings, their preferences, because, my child is naturally very, leader, competitive. So I don't want that to go a little too far. Right. And so personality type plays a huge role. Yeah. When you're raising siblings, analyze and see like, what kind of children do you have?
Yeah. I think, too, like, so my sister has a child who is just turning 4. And my older child is quite anxious around safety issues. She had a big accident when she was young, but even before then, she was still quite anxious about things. And my sister's parenting style is a little bit more hands-off and hanging back. And so my niece will do some risky things or things that she's not supposed to do, which is fine for her family. And that's totally fine with us too. But it's not fine for my almost 9-year-old. She gets really nervous about those things. And so a lot of the time when we're together with those families, I have to help my daughter have really good internal boundaries with herself of it is not your responsibility to shadow your cousin. I know you're worried she's going to get hurt. There's nothing in our backyard that could hurt her really badly, and it's okay to take a break when you need to. It's okay to take, to soothe yourself. And so I think understanding the underlying causes of those behaviors too that we're seeing, I think is really, really important. And then the other piece too, just, I know we were talking a lot about this one, but the other piece is that sometimes little siblings don't mind the older sibling being bossy. I think sometimes, especially when they're quite young, the little siblings look up to the older siblings so much. They think they have this kind of like, ooh, the rock star, like, big kid wants to play with me. Of course, I'll do anything they say. And so I think sometimes we as parents can be kind of sensitive and we see it as like the older one bossing the other one around and directing all the play. But if it's not causing a problem for the younger one, I think it's our job to sit back and let the younger one really, when it is a problem, then we can move in and support them to advocate for themselves. But if it's not a problem, I don't think we need to create a problem where the sibling doesn't always, see that there is one. Do you know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. And as a kid, I was very full of ideas. Let's do this, let's do that, let's put a theater, let's put a show, let's do this, all sorts of creative, fun ideas. And my brother was just like going along with me. And there was nothing wrong with that.
We need followers. Society needs, we do. We need it. We need all sorts in society.
This brings me to this question, Laura, that says, do older children ages 7 to 10 who already have one sibling get a sibling wound or have a major adjustment period from a new sibling? So as I'm understanding, there are 3 children, right? In this family, there is a child ages 7 to 10, I'm not quite sure, who already has a sibling, but there is another new baby, a new sibling. And mom is wondering, what do you think?
Yeah.
What
I
do you
mean,
think?
it's natural and normal for there to be an adjustment period whenever a new family member comes in. And transitions can be hard for children. I think that it a lot does depend on personality and kind of temperament for kids on how that will go. And this phrase sibling wound. I haven't really dug into that phrase a lot. Like in this question, there is a feeling of fear that makes me feel very curious about what's going on for this parent. Whenever when I'm working with parents, whenever I hear the kind of that like inkling of fear driving our movements as parents, that always causes me to get curious. What is it that they're afraid of? Is there some fear of like, we've got a really great dynamic going. I'm worried I'm going to ruin it by bringing in this third child. Like I would feel really curious, and I would encourage, all of us to get really curious with ourselves when we have fear kind of coming in, that's a really good invitation to get curious. I feel like we don't have enough information about this family, but there seems to be some worry there that I would want to get curious about.
Yeah, I think the wording is very strong, sibling wound. And again, I would love more information to know what this mom brings from her own past with her own siblings, or maybe she didn't even have a sibling. So for her, this is new territory. And she doesn't know how to raise children, have siblings, that could be that. But I think the short answer to this is yes, your child will adjust, will go through an adjustment period, and it's okay and normal and healthy. And your child will not have a wound unless, I don't know if it's like a chaotic, disorganized kind of environment. But if it's a typical normal environment, your child will not have a wound, especially if it's a child who is 10 years old. They're a lot grown, in terms of jealousy even, and things like that. And children need stress in their lives. Normal to moderate amount of stress is good. They need to develop that frustration tolerance, handling emotions, and going through life's ups and downs, and adjust. That makes them more resilient and builds tolerance for stress later in life. So I would speak with this parent more. I think I'm concerned more about the parent than the 10-year-old kid who is adjusting to the new sibling.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree. Yeah. And I think, I think when we think about things like, I know a lot of parents in our communities have wounds that they're working on healing from their own childhood. And a lot of us have the goal of helping our kids move into adulthood without those wounds to recover from. And if we think about it from a place of like just wound, like real literal cuts on your skin, that's part of being human. We get wounds, we get hurt, and then there's healing, and there are things that we can do to make the healing process go smoother and faster and not leave a scar. And likely for this family, if they're this conscious of it, they're asking these questions, they're going to be doing the things that help a child adjust and make that transition smoothly so that there isn't some lingering, festering wound as they move into adulthood. It's my guess that they're already doing some of those things that would help ease that transition for the kiddos. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
the imagery of the wound, we don't want open gaping wounds in our kids from their childhood. And we're probably, listening to this podcast and, all the work that I know that the parents in your community and the ones in my community are doing. We're already taking the steps to make sure that, that our kids come out of their childhood in a nice, healthy, healed space. And there's room for acknowledging that they might have work of their own to do that will be theirs, that they will have their journey, and that we can't do for them too, despite our best efforts. And I know that's a really unsettling thing for lots of parents to think about.
We won't end on that note.
No, right. But I mean, there's room for like accepting the humanity of our kids. Yes, we're doing everything in our power to not hand them childhood wounds. And there is work that they will have to do. That is their journey as human beings. And that's it. Like, I mean, there's nothing sad about that to me. It's beautiful. That's the human experience. It's beautiful to me.
I know from my community that people who are doing this personal development, listening to podcasts, reading, they're learning new things, new concepts, new notions. And they also sometimes misuse those words or these concepts. Not everything is a trauma. I recently posted something on Instagram because everybody who calls me, I have trauma, I just got traumatized last night, such and such happened. Trauma is a big word and it gets abused and misused in our culture. Same is the wound. Not everything is a wound. Sibling wound, like that's a very serious statement. Sibling wound would be if someone was molesting, abusing the other sibling. There was sibling abuse, and or some kind of serious thing happening in the household that the sibling develops a sibling wound. But if it's a typical, you brought in a new sibling home, new baby, I don't think that's a wounding experience or a traumatizing experience. Not all experiences are traumatizing. And we can't
even if they're difficult.
Like even if they are difficult. Yeah. So I just want to clarify that there is this notion, my attachment wound, my people use this knowledge in, and it just like annoys me sometimes that yes, we are informed, very well informed, but we shouldn't misuse this stuff. Or somebody contacts me and say, my inner child is thinking this. I'm like, oh God, like, can we just speak like normal people? You can use that language in your therapy, but in day-to-day life, it gets misused. And people feel almost like they're entitled to things because they have a wound or they have a trauma, or do you know what I mean? We have to be careful in how we use language.
Yeah, I do.
Because it informs our actions.
It does. It informs our mindset and our actions. And if we go into thinking like, that we are ruining our kids' lives by adding a sibling, that will influence their transition. Our mindset matters, I think, is what you're getting at, that if we are going in and thinking it's going to be traumatizing to add a child to our family, there's a bit of like self-fulfilling prophecy there that can happen. So I think we have to be really careful with our own mindset, what we're thinking, the meaning making that we're giving to things, and be careful. I think we do have to be really careful with how we're thinking about things, how we're talking to ourselves, and the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree.
Hi, Anna. My question for you is what to do when you have an older sibling that has severe anxiety and can't always control her reactions and will yell and scream, and it scares the younger sibling. My girls are 9 and 12, and the 12-year-old scares the 9-year-old because she has a hard time with regulating her emotions. So I just want to make sure that we are handling this appropriately and making sure that both girls feel safe in their own home.
Okay, that's a tough question from Julie. I understand her concerns for sure. I would be worried too if this was in my household. But I would love to know how they're handling this situation. She doesn't say. So I am going to just suggest the following, that I would work with the older child a lot. If the parent cannot work on developing self-regulation skills, emotion regulation skills, cultivating mindfulness, working with the anxiety, because she's 12, there's so much you can do with a 12-year-old. You can hire a coach. She can go to therapy. If the parent doesn't want to take all the burden, there are other resources, other places that this child can learn, stress management, emotion regulation, and on, and bring those skills to home. Of course, it could be extremely scary for the younger sibling. So that's my initial thought. So I don't know what could you do in the moment besides, if it's happening, your child is yelling, screaming, can you separate, to ensure safety, separate them, but also attend to, to the younger one has probably feelings, or they both, one is agitated, has a lot of anxiety, yelling and screaming, and the other one is scared. So who do you attend to? What's going on? It depends on the day, probably. If the younger one is already used to this dynamic, maybe she also needs to go to therapy or get some help. So this is a very complicated and complex question. There is no do this and it will be solved. I think there are multiple layers going on here. So Julie is aware and she wants safety for her children. But if it's about already safety, and not just yelling and screaming, which is like a typical kids can yell and scream at each other. So then I would be worried. But
yeah, I think the thing that I would want to be seeing in a family like this doing is in calm times, having some collaborative conversations about making a plan for when this is going to happen. If this is happening regularly enough to ask a question about it, then we shouldn't be surprised that it happens, right? So that lets us be proactive. So rather than being in this constant reactive space where we are just reacting to when this is happening, let's get proactive with it, get ahead of it, and make a plan. And a plan where each child is responsible for themselves and their reactions. So, these are a little bit older kids. And a 9-year-old is well equipped to be able to take herself to her room and be able to lock her door so that she can have a quiet space, making sure she has things like earbuds to put in, or noise blocking headphones to put in so she doesn't have to hear the screaming, making sure she's equipped with things so that she can feel empowered to that she's in charge of the emotional atmosphere within her, and she doesn't have to be so open to influence from the other one who's got stuff going on that has nothing to do with the sibling. And so I think that there needs to be plans put in place so that everybody gets to feel safe in our home, everybody gets to have their emotional needs met in our home. And we are not relying on a dysregulated older sibling to calm down so that it can be comfortable for the younger sibling. That's too much pressure. I guarantee that this 12-year-old who's losing it does not want to be doing that. This 12-year-old knows that that's not what she's supposed to be doing. And if she could be doing better, she would be. I guarantee that afterwards she feels remorse or shame or embarrassment for having lost it like that. I think it's pretty safe to assume that she does not want to be in that situation. And adding on top of it, the pressure of like, you scared your sister, you're terrifying her. Like that's a lot. So helping the sister be responsible for herself, getting herself into a space where she can feel safe, and having a plan with the older one too, getting that older one to their own safe space. Both kids need a plan in place.
I love that idea. I love that idea so much, empowering the second child not to be just a victim in that moment, but to do something about the situation. It's absolutely wonderful advice. And hopefully Julie will sit down with her 2 children and they can come up with a plan. And you're right. If a child is already anxious child, has tendency towards anxiety at teenage years, obviously this kind of behavior, she's going to feel a lot of embarrassment and remorse and shame. It's going to increase her anxiety and it's not going to make her do better. She wants to do better, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. I think having that plan of separating them and having their space and what to do for the younger one is wonderful advice. I love that. And finding help for the older one is key. And how does Julie talk to her children in that moment is also influential, right?
And that's part of what having a plan does for us too. So when we have a plan in place, we know what to say. Because we're not panicking. We get thrown into fight or flight too. We do. And so when we're panicking and like one kid's yelling and the other kid's covering her ears, crying, it's hard to know what to do in the moment there because our brains are scrambled, and triggered. And so, I mean, why not be proactive in this? Why not have a plan for the kids and a plan for ourselves so that we know, like, okay, this is what, when that, like, you know, when circumstance A happens, this is our plan. This is what we do.
Yeah. Instead, I think sometimes parents get caught up in the immediate behavior. They want to solve the screaming, the shouting, the yelling. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That may happen again and again, and you have no control over that. But what you have control over is setting up a plan and empowering the younger sibling to take care of her needs, to take care of her space, and not solve the problem right then and there when the sibling is crying and is afraid and the older one is screaming and yelling, throwing things. And parents are also agitated and they're trying to make amend this situation, which is like gigantic, right? At that moment, it's already like 3 people involved, 3 big emotions. Yeah. So I love this idea. I hope this is helpful to Julie. I want to mention again that the listener can send us questions at any time. If they have questions, they can post in our groups. They can send us DMs. If there is a specific topic that they want us to do a deep dive or cover, or just general parenting questions that are unrelated to any specific topic, we would be happy to do special episodes again. My number is 732-763-2576. They can call and leave a voicemail like Julie did. I also have a free SpeakPipe tool on the contact page of my website. I absolutely love the audio messages and the questions that people send me. And I love playing them on air.
Yeah, I think that's really cool too. And just, a reminder too, that the sibling stuff, we obviously, we can't teach everything we know about siblings in one podcast episode. We just can't, and so if there are lingering questions or if you found this helpful and you want to go deeper, we would love to have you come to our workshop. It's going to be a lot of fun, and because it's live, you can come and really get your needs met, really get the information tailored to your situation with the dynamics in your family, which I think will be really powerful and impactful.
I agree. So again, the siblings class, the workshop is a 2-parter.
Yeah.
The first day is October 21st, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central Time. And November 4th is the second part. Again, the same time, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central Time. And the link is in the show notes. And of course, we will promote it on our social media, in our Facebook group. I'll send a newsletter. If the listener is interested and they have no idea how to sign up or get a hold of this information, please get in touch. Our contact information is always available.
Yeah. And we're going to do a replay, right? So I know lots of one big benefit is attending live. It's wonderful if you can do that, but there will be a replay available if you can't make it live and you still want the content and to have the experience of being in the room with us. Yes,
I think that's a wonderful plus. I love the live classes for that reason, the interaction factor. But if people want to just purchase the ticket in the hopes of getting the recording, that's also available. So everything will be available. And I can't wait to meet people and teach this class. We've been talking about this class for a while, but now here we are. The siblings class is coming.
Yes, I'm so excited for it. Thanks so much for having me, Anna. It's always so, I don't know. I feel like there's such good synergy, and I really enjoy answering questions with you. It's so much fun.
It's likewise, Laura. I always love your wisdom and your insights. You always have something from some angle that I haven't even thought about. So
same for sure.
2 great minds are even greater together, right?
Yeah. And that's what's so fun. That's why I'm so excited to teach with you. I think it's going to be a really cool, fun, dynamic class.
Yes. Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura, to you. And thank you, listener, for joining us today. Connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I'm Anna Seawald. Thank you so much for listening.